Hi everyone. Today's Build in Public video is going to be a bit more specialized, specifically in the field of branding and marketing. This is an area that I am very familiar and knowledgeable in. I've been in the marketing and branding space for over 15 years. So I thought today we'll do something a bit more focused around my area of specialties to solve one problem that a lot of brand owners have been facing for a very, very long time. And that is to analyze and to audit brands, whether your own brand or your competitor brands. Historically, a lot of these analyses are hidden behind very, very high paywalls because what you will need to do is you will need to hire a research company. These typically take anywhere between $25,000 a year, all the way up to I've seen $120,000 brand pulse surveys, as we call them, that allows for corporate brands down to growing brands to analyze and understand how their brands are trending against competitor brands. Now, it is my belief that we no longer need to be paying that kind of money to be understanding how your brand is performing in the marketplace, in the eyes of the consumer. Because a lot of the information these days are now available on the internet, has always been available on the internet. Accessing that data was difficult historically, but it's no longer the case, especially if we're building everything out of Claude Code. So today I'm going to show a workflow that will obviously be packaged into a skill. We'll be using multiple tools to aggregate information to scrape data from websites, scrape social platforms, and we'll also be looking at Google Trends, search trends, because all these come together to piece what I would call a modern brand audit, right? That is powered by agents that can actually be ran and will not cost you anywhere close to a five-figure bill. And more importantly, it will not take weeks or months to produce the analysis. It will be done in 20, 30 minutes at most, and it will probably cost a couple of dollars. As usual, what I will be doing is I will be building out the workflow live and show you a lot of the thinking. This will be methodical, and I will be talking through each part of the build. So we'll start off by understanding what is it that we are auditing, right? In the first place, what is your yardstick that you'll be measuring against? So that would actually be your brand. But what you'll be doing is you'll be creating an audit of your brand, right? What that means is that the best representation of your brand, hopefully, should actually be your website. Now, I understand that for some brands out there, especially the younger brands, you might actually have a divergence between how you implement your brand on your website versus how you intend your brand to be. Okay, that's a different scope altogether. That is intent versus execution, and that's an area that we can get into if that's something that you guys would like to see. But for today, my assumption is that your brand will be well represented by how your website is designed and how your website is brought to life. Okay, so in order for us to audit the brand, the way that I'm approaching this is to say, let's look at your website right now. I'm going to be using FileCrawl to scrape the website. Or rather, not your website, but the intended brand to be audited, right? Target brand. So this could be your brand if you're doing an audit for yourself, or this can be your competitor's brand if you're doing a competitor review, right? So we begin with scraping it with FileCrawl. what we're trying to do is we're trying to pull out adjectives that hide together with the brand name. So for example, when you go to a brand's website and right next to the brand name, what is the website using to describe it, right? For example, the healthiest tea, the healthiest organic tea that you can be drinking, organic tea from Japan, right? So these are all associations that the web designer or the brand itself is trying to build associations towards that brand. And like I said, if you have represented your brand well in how your website is deployed, the About Us page, your products page, your home page, different landing pages should be filled with a lot of these keywords, as we call it, or adjectives, which are usually used in association to the brand name. So for us, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to pull out adjectives that are used together with the brand name to then understand, or rather to derive, what brand associations the brand owner is trying to attach to the target brand. So what you might find is that there is going to be quite a lot of words that will be tied to it, because people are going to say things like highest quality, highest value, right? And again, those are table stakes. But what we want to do is we want to pick the differentiating. So remove, ignore things that are hygiene or table stakes. So things like, oh, you can trust us. Again, the most trustworthy brand. Everyone needs trust in their brand building, right? But what I want is to pull out the specific associations that infer differentiation, infers positioning. Dot 5, right? So it will come in the form of like volume / prominence of on website. So then I will say examples, must trust. All brands need trust. Quality, right? Brands claim quality, right? So here is your first side of it, which is who and what is the target brand trying to represent. That's your first part of the equation, okay? And then let's put a box around this. Now, the next thing that we would want to do in this flow is we then want to see if this is your intended identity, these are the list of associations that you are trying to build. The next part of the equation is, does the market or target agree? And this is where we are trying to understand the difference and the deviation between intention and execution. And the best way for you to understand this is to derive this is, what are people saying about their brand / products? And this is where the magic of LLMs and comes to play, right? Because again, people are pretty vocal these days on social media, platforms like TikTok, Instagram, Reddit, right? Especially for larger categories where there are more players, especially high involvement products and categories, people tend to be quite vocal, speaking about the brands that live within it, and then sharing feedback, reviews, So ultimately, what we're trying to do is we're trying to understand this piece. And the way that we will do this is we will scrape the internet. That's going to be social channels. That's going to be reviews as primary channels, right? The way that we would use this is we'll use a combination of tools called scrape creators. So it's basically just an aggregator that allows for you to scrape social channels, creator channels. You can use Perplexity for reviews, right? So the goal here is to see if I have association A, association B, association C. Let's just say it's just this set here, right? And we're just doing these three. This will give me intent. And this will give me actual delivery, right? Not intent, I won't call it delivery, but it's more of like, this is what you intend to do. This is what's really happening. What people are really saying, in actual fact. Feel, think, feel, and say. As opposed to try to, define it. It's really what people are thinking, feeling, and saying. And then from there, the difference between this and this, right? And I might even want to box this up so that when I hand this over to the build, it knows. Actually, let's bring this back up here. And then what we do is we connect this to, okay, this is the gap. Because what I'm doing is I'm able to derive, right, what the brand's trying to portray or what associations it's trying to build versus what is actually happening. And ultimately what contributes to a lot of this is customer experience, right? A lot of it is customer experience, I would say. And then what ends up happening is they will leave reviews, they will talk to communities about their experiences, etc. And that's really it, it's really quite simple. The question becomes like, what is the gap here? Like if you're saying that you have 5 different associations and you're seeing very little gaps, then you're doing good, right? If you're seeing 5 different associations, 2 of them are doing really well, and then 3 of them are really far behind, then you've got something to anchor on in terms of fixing, The gap is the analysis, and then that produces recommendations to improve. So this gives that. Okay. Now, this is all about imagery at the end of the day, imagery and positioning. There is another larger piece of the equation, okay, and that's going to be the third piece of the puzzle, okay, which is going to be, and this is the big one, right? Is there demand for your brand, for the target brand actually, and this is the big one because you could have your associations that you intended in your brand strategy and your positioning work, right? But the question is, are these associations translating into demand, right? So this is the third piece of the equation, I would say. So you've got the identity, the gap analysis. And then the third piece of the puzzle is that, is there demand for the target brand? And what this, in order for us to derive this, it's really about understanding people are searching for. Like these days, you're going to find that this is not as powerful as before because people are beginning to go onto AI to do their research, to ask their questions about brands, about categories. But again, it's still a really, really good benchmark because, again, I would say that using AI these days is still relatively, you're still in the early adopters phase at least. Where I'm at in Asia, it's still innovator space even, but again, understanding what people are searching is usually a very good proxy for demand for your brand. So what you'll be doing here is you are going to be using a tool, something like an Ahrefs, right? And let me give this something different. Okay, so you'll be using an Ahrefs, and what you'll be doing is you will be trying to extract branded search, right? Trends for the target brand. Okay, so is it growing? Is it going up? Or is it going down? Or is it just flat? Okay, but one of the things that most people get wrong, okay, and this is where it kills me really to see how analysts get this wrong, and brand managers, business owners get this wrong as well, is that when you do an analysis like that, you don't actually refer to a benchmark. Is not the right word for it, but it's not normalized. Okay, you need to normalize the category search trends. Okay, because I'll get to the reasoning here. Because what ends up happening is that if your category is going down or if your category is going up, naturally the brands that are part of that category will be brought up or brought down with the category behavior. So by understanding what is the category search trend, you are then able to normalize what your true brand's position is. Very similar to how when you invest in the S&P 500, you would want to outperform the S&P 500, right? So if the S&P 500 did 8%, you're doing well. If you have a 9% or 10% return, you've done really, really well because you beat the market. We need to take those same principles and apply it to the analysis that we're running here. Because if your category is on the downtrend, but your brand is flat, you're doing well. It's not looking good in the grand scheme of things, but it does change your strategy. If you're a market leader and your category is declining, your job to be done, therefore, is to stem the bleed on the category front. It's probably going to be pretty tough, but as a market leader, you will be likely the only one to be able to do it. How do you stop the bleed in your category? And that's a very, very different play and a very, very different strategy compared to if you are a challenger brand on a category that's on the up, right? Because what you might be deluded by is that you're growing really quick, right? But the question is, are you growing quicker than the category, right? Are you stealing enough from the category leader? And again, that's a very, very different strategy compared to being a market leader and having to stem a category bleed. Okay, so this is what we're going to be looking to build. There's going to be, and this is really messy, I hope that Claude Opus 4.7, which is pretty good at vision, can decipher a lot of this. So I'm not going to clean up too much. I'm just going to label this, which is workflow A, which is identity. and gap analysis. So this is your who you are versus how people think about you. And then the second bit is workflow B. And then collectively, what you're trying to do is to then present report. To answer two questions. Actually answers a few questions, right? These questions. Which is for the target audit, for the target brand, what is the intended image associations of the brand? From there, you're able to infer what is the target brand's positioning. Okay. Then we will also be answering the question on how well is the target brand intended positioning. Okay. How well is the brand perceived versus the association, its intention. Then last is how well is the brand performing from a demand standpoint. I'm not really looking at things like brand awareness, brand association, etc. That stuff can actually be derived by how much conversations are being had. But ultimately, all those are contributions, or they are part of what really matters, right? Which is how much demand is there in the market, and is it going up or is it going down? You won't get the absolute demand with this, right? But it will tell you if you're trending up and trending down. And this isn't something that you will probably do every week. It's not a tracker, but it will give you a very good sense around where your brand currently is, or where the target brand currently is. And it's probably intended to be ran every quarter to see how you're trending over time. Are you gaining versus your competition? Are you beating the market? And that's what we're attempting to do here. It's not meant to replace a brand tracker, but again, it gives you a very good sense around what actions will you be taking in order for you to grow your brand, generate demand, right? And what comes after that will be supplementing it with marketing. So yeah, that's basically the workflow that we have here. I'm just going to go ahead and build this. A few things that you will need when you are building this. The first one is you will need to have MCPs or APIs that are prepped already for script creators and Perplexity. And then the second is going to be an Ahrefs account. In order to make this work, a lot of builders and skills that you inherit or you copy from the internet won't tell you what connectors you need. I'm telling you right now, these are some of the things that you need to have ready already before you go ahead and build something like this. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to go ahead and copy this entire thing. Okay, now let's get into it. We are building a new skill today called Brand Auditor. Here's the intended workflow / architecture. Just then ask clarifying questions if needed. So I'll be back in terms of once it has given me the clarifying questions. I will probably respond to it and then share some thoughts. So a few questions that it's gonna ask. I'm gonna keep it general purpose. For perception scraping, let's use a build native. So this one's asking me whether I want to use last 30 days as a substep. And yeah, I mean, we could use that, but for me, for the purpose of this build specifically, we'll do something else. So you'll build it from scratch, right? And then what's the output? It's going to fault markdown. I think we'll go with a let's do this. Let's park it inside the caliber folder, single deep run, hello modes, and let's submit it. Okay. One little tip here is that I have instructions inside of my Claude.md that asks my agent to always ask for input in the ask user questions format. So then as opposed to having to type things out, what I'm doing instead right now is I'm using this. And I found that in terms of building out skills, this speeds things up significantly. So really good thing to trigger more frequently. By default, Claude Code will use this tool, but in order for it to be more consistent, just plug it into your Claude.md. Yeah. Okay, what input must the user provide an invocation beyond the obvious? Definitely geographic focus. I think category and competitor set would be good if that's available. Okay, known brand side context. User paste any insider context they have. I think this is okay as well. Brand audit / command. So this is something that's interesting as well when designing skills. For something like this, do you just want to use a / brand audit and then put in your input, right? Or do you want it to be invoked from a natural language standpoint? And in this case, like for me, I'm just going to run with a / command because I don't need this triggering when I'm randomly talking about a brand that I'm intending to audit. So this becomes very clear when to invoke it. Yep. Okay, so we'll submit answers again. And then it might come back again with another set of questions. But what it's trying to do is, as opposed to give me one large set of questions for me to answer through, it's basically just asking it in multiple choice questions for me. The previous builds on this channel, it tends to be pretty long, right? But I found that this to be a really, really big hack in terms of speeding up the process for us to get to the first MVP for a skill. Okay. So all inputs are locked. Drafting now. It's going to check skill conventions and then write. Yeah, and I'll be back to review in the next session. So just checking in with how it's doing. It's drafted the skill.md. It's now writing up the reference documents, right? So that's workflow A, perception, etc. So let's take a look inside of my skills to see what it's done. It's got assets here, references, skill.md. Okay, let's take a look. Yep. So two workflows run in parallel and converge in one report. You just need something similar to this. File crawl, perplexity plus web search. Yep. Review site file crawl. That's good. So I'm crawling a review site. So that was not part of my architecture here, right? Which is great. Okay, so what it's not having here is the script creators piece. And I think it's likely because I don't have a connection, which I'll probably need to fix in a bit. So then it's giving it a role. Inputs, brand name URL, and an optional brand site context. Yep. Workflow, just gonna plug it into this folder for now. Okay. A2 is establishing perception. So intent versus perception, that's the gap, right? Okay, so it's missing out a lot of the stuff from search creators here. So that's going to be a new reference that I will need to create for it to be using search creators to pull all of this out. Workflow A gap, let's take a look. Bonus clean, contradiction, that's nice. There we go. And then what do we have here? Homepage hero. So yeah, crawl the right pages, extract adjectives and descriptive phrases, apply the hygiene filter. So the default table stakes, like what I was saying, you know, and again, these can be tuned, right? Like for example, best in class is definitely table stakes, customer focused, also table stakes, innovation, cutting edge, modern. These can be position types. This can be actually positioning, like Apple owns innovation, right? Authentic, again, this is not table stakes, I would say. Expert and professional, that depends on the category, but could be table stakes as well. There you go, got examples here, which is great. Rank top 5, different. So this looks very good, very strong. Okay. All right, so what I'm gonna do, because a lot of this looks good, let me take a look at the demand analysis. For brand in category, primary brand, Patagonia, category. So it's using Ahrefs. Okay, so there's a few things. What do you want to do from here? Review the draft files that I've done already. And then you can run evals as well, right? So I'm going to review it. Notion B2B. Okay, so I'm going to chat about it instead because I've got some feedback to give it. The main thing right now for me is I need to go and get it to use script creators as opposed to what it's doing here right now. So that's the main thing that I will fix. It's going to require some wiring, API keys and whatnot in the backend So I'm just gonna focus on that. Probably pause the video for a bit while I work on that. A lot of like piping stuff, so not the most exciting things to be sharing. So yeah, let me get to that and then we'll be back. Okay, we're back, and I just wrapped up a lot of the fixes that I wanted to get to. Started off with working out Script Creators integration, but in the end, there were a couple of things that also appeared, which I got to work on as well. So let me go through what we did. Like I mentioned, there's the Script Creators integration, basically a lot of plumbing. So we didn't go through that in much detail. This one is talking about a duplication around a skill that I have created for my workplace. And yeah, it's basically comparing the two, because what I had done is I asked it to go and get the documentation and the approach on how to use script creators from what I built work, right? And then what it had done is it just ported the social listening playbook, so we can see that over here, right? So how do you actually go ahead and scrape things from a social listening perspective? There are a couple of things here that are important. The first one being that Reddit is notoriously difficult to scrape, so you need to give it very good instructions in how to do it. Otherwise, it will end up burning and wasting a lot of tokens to get you to your intended insights. But yeah, so that should be the script creator bit. All of this is talking about how we do the social listening piece. Again, a lot of how you go about running social listening is unique to your abilities. You need to understand how to go about doing it. I won't cover it in detail today because that's not the scope of this video. But a couple of other things that I did in terms of fixing up the skill and the workflow is actually around the reporting template. A few things comes to mind. The first one is how is it presenting back the gap, right? For each of the adjectives or the associations that the brand wants to build, how many of them are aligned? How much of them are contradictory, right? You say one thing, but in the end, other people are thinking completely different, or it's missing, or it's drifting, right? So you are kind of there, but you're progressively drifting away from it. So what happens then is we landed on this 3-layer output to identify what's your brand identity, what the gaps are, the details around it, and then followed by a recommendation section. So then it can be actionable. And then finally, what I wanted to add as well, which I thought was a pretty nice trick, is to add a word cloud. So that would be basically your brand vocabulary based on scraping the website and a brand vocabulary around what people are saying. So I thought that's just a nice touch in terms of how the report can be presented. And then here's the final narrative baked into the report. We've got the executive summary, we've got the word clouds, the identity map, the analysis, which is the deep dives, and then basically what do we do from here in terms of improving and growing our brand. So yeah, key design principles, thanks Alfred, lots of details in here, and also to track back a lot of my decisions around building the skill, right? So this is a pretty nice summary. I think something that we can practice more of is at the end of every skill.md that we build. One of the things that we can do right now is we can then tell it to, can you document this, right? As a reference inside the skill, not to be used in the skill.md, but if we are upgrading this good documentation to refer to around decisions made and even changes. So yeah, add this as an additional step at the end into the reference. So it's sort of like a readme, if you will. I don't can just tell it. You can call it maybe a readme so that people know exactly, or in future references when we're upgrading the skill, we know how we got to where we got to, and that allows for you to then make changes a lot better. So yeah, I think that we are pretty good with the skill. I'm pretty happy with where it's landed. I went through each of these documents one by one. I won't go through in detail all of them. I breezed through them earlier, but the next stage for me is to run this with a brand, and I will come back to you with the output. So what I've done is we have ran a example report. In this case, I have actually identified using DJI, the drone company, and specifically we want to tag the handheld cameras. So it's going to be the Osmo series, and the geography is limited to Singapore, and that's the website, right? So it went ahead to go and run the entire skill, and here's the summary of the test run. 16 script creators credit burn only, so that's not much, to be honest. And then we've got 6 Firecrawl credits, etc. So it's 12 minutes of runtime. And here's the report, right? So a few things that he has highlighted is that the perception is thin. Nothing really appeared on the Reddit on Singapore. So I might want to dig into how it queried Reddit. TikTok is big with a lot of heavy creator noise, and then we've got some issues around the website, and there's a graceful fallback. So yeah, that's the thing that ran. Let's look through some of the findings. What I'm going to do is I want you to create me a report with this, use this design guide. So the design guide is created by Claude Design, and I've housed it inside of my context document vault. I've basically extracted that as guidelines and kept it inside my vault. So then it can create a HTML report using that as its brand guidelines. Okay, so then now let's take a look. Executive summary is okay. This is the brand word cloud that obviously doesn't get it doesn't print in but yeah, here you have the two dimensions, which is intent and perception, and this is probably gonna spin up a word cloud, right? So let's see how it looks. Brand identity map, and what did it actually spit out? Okay, this is a bit hard to read in Obsidian, which is fine. So then what we'll do is we'll just look through the words here. Cinema grade imaging in pocket form, 3-axis mechanical gimbal stabilization, Osmo audio, native intelligent tracking, all-in-one design philosophy. So one of the things that I find to be a bit off, not off, but rather like a critique of mine for what we've built here is that a lot of these are product features as opposed to brand associations, right? So they're not adjectives, single word adjectives, which to me, I need to go and figure out why it's spitting out all these product features instead. It could be the case that I've just given it DJI for the purpose of handheld cameras. And if what I said instead was, hey, just go and analyze DJI as a brand, then it might look at it from a corporate standpoint to see what is it trying to communicate outside of features, right? So a bit more testing on my end, probably, to then go and tune it. And then we've got stuff that's filtered as table stakes. So these feel a bit more like associations for the brand, regardless of the product category. So innovative, stunning, vivid, crystal clear. So this one's probably image quality related. For creators could be interesting, right? And it's identified it as content creator marketing default. Anyways, intended positioning, so it's one word, not one word, sorry, it's an entire line here. For content creators and adventurers who want professional imaging without lugging professional gear. So it's an ecosystem of pocket-sized camera. So some stuff that's interesting that we could pull. The way I would analyze this is that, first of all, the positioning clearly is for creators and adventurers, right? And then the other thing is it's an ecosystem as opposed to it just being a singular product, right? Drone engineered Drone engineered could be another one, because regardless of whether it is their drones itself or its camera or it's their handheld cameras, they're all using the drone engineering, right? That gives it a bit more of a perception that it's more cutting edge than just regular cameras. Yeah. So, and then the rest of this is all like product features, right? And I like this as well. We engineered the impossible into a small body before, we're doing it again. Yeah, it's nice. Okay, so then let's take a look at the perceived versus intended. Yeah, here we have the gap matrix. Okay, so we've got stuff that's highly aligned. Oh, okay, let's take a look at perceived association. So this is pulling stuff from the different creators, and unfortunately, because it couldn't pull the Osmo Pocket 4, and maybe it's too new anyways, but again, a lot of people have been talking about it, so you might have gotten better, fresher content. Yeah, so we've got quite a lot of stuff that's been pulled. Yeah, so these are the examples. And then we've got YouTube, we've got Reddit. So it reviewed 25 videos, which is good. Let's see what it did for TikTok. Only one. So again, that's bad, right? Because you would imagine the volume coming from TikTok will be significant. Oh, there we go. We've got 65 comments here, 37 comments here, 66 comments here. Yep. You can see that there are certain things that is aligned, where's adrift, right? So all in one doesn't survive contact with the lineup's actual inconsistency. And then what's missing? So there's no signal about this. So that's the gap that it's analyzing, and then here's the demand performance. So my immediate feedback here is that it's snapshotting just a month. What I need it to do is to show me month on month, what does it look like, right? So then I can see whether it's trending up or it's trending down, you know? And then category normalization. And again, category normalization doesn't quite matter if it's not a trend, right? Because what I want to do is I want to see trending upwards, trending downwards, and understanding of intent. Okay, this word cloud isn't great, but it's following my brand to a T, and it's just really, really wordy. But there we go, demand performance. You can see Osmo Pocket 3 being the largest. And for me, I feel like the branded demand should be aggregated as opposed to split up. And then now it's giving me the math. So it's brand-led, not category-led. It's kind of obvious. And Insta360 is catching up. So not really the most insightful, if I'm honest, which tells me that you probably want to fix. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's the build here. Overall, I would say that this is probably a 6.5 out of 10 in terms of what it's produced for me. I mean, this brand vocabulary thing is okay in the sense where my eyes are obviously pulling towards specific words, which is good, but these are all product features, which for me is not the name of the game, in my opinion. It should be adjectives that represent the brand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run more tests and I'm going to be improving on it, as you should always do with a lot of these tools that you are building. Okay, cool. Hopefully you learned something today. Hopefully you can tell that these days you really don't need to be running brand trackers to give you an idea of what you should be doing for your brand. As you can tell here, it's giving us recommendations around what to do. It's a bit hard to read, to be honest. Let's take a look here. It's easier to read here. It's giving you all the recommendations here, and it will probably take me 2 to 3 sessions to fix this and get it to production ready. Every skill should take about 3 hours or so, is how much time you would spend with it for the initial production and tests of it. And then it should continuously evolve as opposed to a one and done kind of thing. All right, cool. Thanks, everyone. I'm back again with a post-edit cut because what I had done is gave a few rounds of feedback, and I thought that this output is much more in line with what I had intended originally, and to just show you post improvements outputs. So this is a V2, right? And it actually analyzed 1061 comments compared to what was before. So this was the previous one, right? Which again lacked depth completely. Whereas for here, we've used quite a bit of credits, we've analyzed quite a bit of comments, and what you will find is, again, intent versus perception, a lot more has come out of it, right? We got a brand identity map on the adjective layer that is more brand centric, right? As opposed to it being all about products. And then we have intended positioning. And more importantly, look at this. The perceived clusters now is much better in terms of how it's showing you sentiment, its sources. It's using 58 Reddit threads, right? And then we've got 28 videos on YouTube, 3 TikToks. So you're seeing how much more the data is being used right now in this iteration. And you can then see how, again, my design style right now is showing you the 91 being, say, positive, 5 being neutral, and 3 being negative. Clearly, DJI is seen as a market leader, but it is now aging and it is being taken over, I would say, by Insta360, right? iPhone being the actual competitor. So that's an interesting take that came up. Insta360 caught up, right? It's a narrative as opposed to a verdict. So DJI has the ability to defend its position, and that can be evident from the 73 examples that it analyzed to then come up with this assessment, right? Some issues around QC, right? That each trust, etc. So then you can then see the gap matrix here that is using adjectives as opposed to product features. These are the different clusters that match with the intent to then see, okay, engineering led, so they are still really good on the engineering front. So that's aligned, but it looks like it's drifting a bit, right? So this is how I read point 1 and point 2. Creator empowering is actually something that is unclaimed at the moment, meaning to say this is white space, right? And then we have things that are drifting, right? So ecosystem native, that's drifting. Effortless sophistication, that's drifting. So action 6 is clearly not doing so well, needs a lot. So demand performance now has also seen a trend that's been included, right? And as someone who follows this a bit, I am aware that for quite a while, since December, there has been a bit of a disappointment about the Osmo Pocket 4 not launching. And yeah, so you can see that dip there. It's using 6 months data. Maybe it should use more data. That could be a feedback to it. But you can see how Insta360 is just, consistent across the board. So clearly they are leading. And then you can't see much in terms of category trends here because it's pretty flat, right? So basically category is flat, but DJI, you can see there's a slight curve downwards, whereas Insta360 is growing. So this tells you, right, strategically what you're thinking about. DJI decreased and 41%, and then Insta360 is 52%. So the gap is 11 points, not doing so well. So you can see right now, again, we've got recommendations coming through. I won't go through all of it in detail, but what a world of difference it makes by just spending a bit of time giving it feedback on its initial skill. Because again, this to me is 90% ready to ship. So I thought I'd add an additional post-edit note to just show you guys what the end output really is. And I'm pretty happy with this. Cool. Gone for real now.